This is Fam Electric Ghost live on the air on our Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch channels with Katherine Lazaruk for the first time. How are you doing tonight?
I'm just great. How are you today?
I'm doing great. We do have to let people know we are talking the news platform, and this podcast episode is actually episode 877 of the Fam
Woo!
Electric podcast. We've been on the air since 2016. We're at episode 877 for those who keep track. And so, yeah, tonight what we're going to focus on is no one sees your skills and the questions that you like to answer regarding that topic. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Always cool to interview people. We've tried to expand from 2016, where we started with just musicians, and now we've been expanding to therapists, life coaches, CEOs, authors, writers, actors, models, all types of people, anybody we find interesting. So one of the things that you mentioned is like no one sees your skills. So maybe you can talk about like, well, how do you get people to see your skills?
Right. So if you are in any kind of profession where you need to be talking to people, which is pretty much every profession that there is, the concern is that people are like, well, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. And I don't need to worry about the way that I look. And I don't need to worry about my presence and how I come across because, my work will speak for itself. Except it doesn't. People assume if they've hired you for the job that you can do the job, but right, when you're meeting people, they don't know anything about you. So everything in the way that you show up from, especially like we're in such an online environment, the way that you look, the things that you wear, the way that you speak, the things that you say, all of those things contribute to someone finding you credible, finding you hireable, assigning you more responsibility if you want more responsibility. All of those things play into this. And it's interesting because I've always struggled a little bit right from the beginning of my career in this work, because I also believe you should not judge a book by its cover. Like we should all have a chance to get to know each other and spend some time and to find out that people are amazing, because of course people are, but we just don't live like that, right? We're still a really visual society, and there are still some societal constructs that exist. And so I don't tell people these things to make them afraid and be like, oh my God, people are judging me. What am I? It's only information. Like if you want to be a better musician, go take some music lessons, right? You want to be a better artist, go take some art lessons. You really want to learn how to come across as credible and professional in whatever field you're in, then you take some lessons. You just take the information in and you use what you've got so that people can actually, so that you look as good as you are, essentially.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because sometimes it's hard because the lens people wear, like I have a couple of hats. I'm a producer, I'm a musician, I'm a podcaster.
Right.
I'm also a professional. I've been doing it since 1993.
Right.
And the strange thing is like a lot of stuff I do is like intangible. Like you're like, well, I guess it's tangible. But like when you write code, either you get it or you don't, right? Either so you could go into that level with the directors, and they have no idea what the programmers and people like me are talking about. And so what we have to do is translate it and kind of make it so they understand it. And we have to sell ourselves. And there's some programmers that say, why should I have to sell myself as I've been doing it for 25 years. I know what I'm doing. Right.
Right.
And some people have a hard time getting exposed to that group of people because they're judging you. They might not think that the programmer that's the best programmer might not be the best communicator. But in the way we work sometimes is him judge that level is actually not exactly fair, or her level, because they, that person is judging them and they don't even know how to do the job that they're doing. And they're making like a judgment about something that they have nothing, don't know that they could actually lose a really good person. So there's a balance to what you're saying. And I think sometimes people put too much weight on that outward appearance without looking at the inner depth. But I guess it's very, how do you balance?
How do you resolve that? I agree. I agree 100% with you, because definitely I'm a bit of an outlier in my profession because I hate shopping. I don't give two shits. Oh, sorry. How are you with profanity? Are we allowed to swear?
We're good.
They're not. better not. I don't care about fashion. I like to look good. I like for people to look good. And I like for people to feel that they are as authentic as they possibly can be when they show up. So it's interesting when you described yourself, you said, well, I'm a podcaster, I'm a musician, and I'm a producer. And the way that I look at it is the framework that I work in is a 3C framework. And I've developed it over the last 12, 13 years working in this arena. And my first thing is always you want to start with your character. So the first C is character, because who you are at 4 is who you are at 104. Doesn't change internally. Like who you are at core doesn't change. And I believe that nature doesn't make mistakes. And whatever container you showed up on this planet in is the perfect container to do whatever you're meant to do on this planet. So the sooner you make friends with your container, the easier your life is going to roll. So that's the first piece, really understanding who you are as a person, what you like to do. You know, if you're really funky or you're really fierce or you're really cool or creative, there are things that you can do appearance-wise to make those things evident to people. So there's a character piece. You really have to investigate who you are. So you know yourself well, you know you're an artist. So you want to show up looking a little bit like an artist might look. Now, what you said earlier is interesting because the next C is congruence, which means that whatever's going on the inside with your character needs to show up on the outside so that people go, oh yeah, this person says, like, so you walk up to me, you roll up and you're like, yeah, this is what I do. I'm like, that totally makes sense. You're wearing the hoodie, you got the gear. Okay, you look like I would expect a producer to look like, having met a number of producers, right? They're all wearing hoodies. They're all super cash. In fact, I mean, I'm trying to think, if I met a producer who like showed up in a 3-piece suit, I'd probably be immediately suspicious. I'd be like, dude, it's too much flash.
That's like a Barry Gordy type, if they're Barry Gordy type, maybe. I'm kind of like, I'm a synthesis. So you see behind me, that's all my synths.
Totally
right behind me all the time. But
it's different.
I think
piece
I try
has
to
to be
present.
there. Who you are. So the congruence piece has to be there because we don't live in a vacuum. I remember the first time when I started my work, I was all about self-expression because that's also super important. And the way you show up is a form of self-expression. It's a vehicle for that. So I was really into that. And was my sole focus. And then I went, okay, maybe that's not the only thing that we need to think about. And so I was actually working with a business consultant who was helping me pull my business past the 6-figure mark. And the first meeting that I had with him, I used to have like kind of a chunky, funky hairdo. And I was like wearing these really unusual clothes. And I had this 5-subject Hilroy spiral notebook that I loved with a glitter pen because I'm so fun and creative. And I get into his boardroom and I sit down with my stuff. And this dude literally walks in, looks at me, looks at my book on the table, leaves, says nothing, leaves, comes back with a hardcover, the Moleskine books with the hardcover and the bookmark. They're really lovely notebooks. Right. Comes in, puts this notebook down on the table beside my little Hilroy spiral notebook. And he looks at me and he goes, I want you to transfer all your notes from this into that. And I never want to see that on my table again, ever.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, but my clients love how down to earth I am. And they love that I'm so, blah, blah, like practical. And he goes, what kind of consultant are you again? And I'm like, an image consultant. And he's like, right.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah. So that was sort of the first time that I had a personal experience with the balance between self-expression and what I do and what people expect of me. And I could tell you that as soon as I started to think, okay, I still want to be myself. I still want to be funky and creative. I still want to show up. And I also need to be finished because people are expecting someone who says they're an image consultant to show up looking great, which is kind of annoying because I'm like, I know a lot of stuff about the internal psychological work. I want to share with you what that is, but no one's going to buy. And my business doubled as soon as I paid a little bit of attention to that. And that happens for everyone that I've ever worked with. Everything goes more easily if you understand it's kind of like gaming the system, really. So you got the congruence piece. And then the third C is control, because you can't control if someone's going to like you, not like you, right? But there are things you can do to make that outcome more likely by thinking of your audience, by handling the first 2 C's, and then controlling for the details. Like, I don't like to groom a whole lot, right? Like I want to get up and get out of the house in 20 minutes. So I've had to front load things so that I can do that and still look decent, right? I was at a conference recently in Rhode Island, and there was a woman there that she says, "Oh, she goes, must take a lot of work to look so cultivated." And first of all, I was super flattered. I'm like, I look cultivated? Great. And then she was like, must take a lot of work. I'm like, no, it takes front loading. Like, I have to make sure my wardrobe is functional and I need to make sure I've got my stuff together. But it's sort of high maintenance to be low maintenance. And once you do it, then you're done. Then you can like move forward until like 5 or 6 years down the road and your style doesn't fit you anymore. Does that answer your question? You were kind of talking about how do you resolve the inners, inside and outside? Resolve that struggle?
Yeah, I think
I think resolve it by concentrating on yourself.
Yeah, because I guess, the way I kind of resolve artist, and I get into like I'm a software designer, right? So part of my life is software design, and that audience is a totally different than the art audience. So in a way, because I have kind of this multifaceted life, I can be my art self. I'm wearing this, like, but when I'm in with that C-level people and I have to work, I've been in Tokyo, I've been in New York, like I've had a job as well. But the thing is, like, I know what my audience, just like a musician, like if I'm in front of an audience, I kind of read the audience. And if I'm into funk and I'm doing fusion, but maybe that audience doesn't like it. So I switch to soul. I switch to soul because they're into that. But you kind of read the audience, you read how you present yourself. And I wear a lot of hats, so I present myself for the different places I'm going to be based on what I'm going to be at that time.
That's right.
And
I like to think of it like,
yeah, I think that's what I was trying to get to. But
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. That's terrible. When I get excited, I interrupt. It is one of my main character failings that I will be working on for the rest of my life. It's like, you can be excited and not interrupt people. So forgive me.
That's cool. I get it. Got into it.
I did. I was so into it. The thing that I think about with that is I tell people it's like you have a piece of, like you have your stereo, right? Same piece of equipment. You can turn the volume up, you can turn the volume down, but it's the same piece of equipment. So I think if you need to be the same person, you need to bring your whole self when you show up, and you're just, like you say, highlighting different facets for different audiences, but you still need to be the same person, because there are people that I've met and worked with that are really different from personal to professional settings. And then I'm like, yeah, you're lying to yourself somewhere. Like, get congruent across the board. And I understand what you mean about the different audiences, because of course I'm a writer. I've done a little bit of songwriting. I perform. I do this professional presence work. So I'm in high level boardrooms and I'm with regular people. And, there are moments when I want to be at the ball game, drinking a beer and eating a hot dog. So, right. It's managing. How do I show up with my whole self and still be okay with the audience? Or if I want to challenge the status quo, how do I do that in a way that's actually effective? Right. So the theory that I'm working with now is whole person, whole presence. And I'm writing my business book on that. It's in progress, because we get this whole thing where people are like, oh, we want you to bring your whole self to this. And then you show up with your whole self and they're like, no, not like that. That's too much whole self for us. And I'm like,
I would find that sometimes like the business community has been kind of in this bell curve, right?
Yeah.
So the bell curve of the business community, what they seem to not understand is because I'm a creative.
Yeah.
And I tell them a lot of times I've run into business people who say they want creatives, but they drive them away because they want them to try to like conform to a thing that a creative is not going to conform to. Right. So like if you don't make your environment, you say you want a creative person that thinks out the box, but everybody in your place is in a box.
Right.
Right. So how are you going to get somebody who's outside the box when you're trying to force them in the box?
Right. You know what I think? I'm doing it again. Continue, cool. Please continue.
But that's been my whole thing is like as an independent. I eventually decided that being within a company as a full-time worker wasn't for me, because I wasn't in that box. Because of my creative tendency, I decided, like, I'm going to be true to my creative self. I'm going to be a consultant. And I find myself more satisfied in my consultant role because I don't have to fit as much in the box, and I can tell the truth and I can do what I want to do. Where if I was an employee, sometimes I don't get the freedom to tell the truth that I can do it as a consultant. And so I just decided, well, that I'm still doing that work. I'm still doing the same work, but I'm not an employee, and I'm not in that train. I'm not getting into that structure where they're trying to force me a round peg into the square hole. And I just found out, I think it is a matter of really discovering who you are.
Yes.
And applying it from my creative self to my.
Right. You wouldn't believe the number of clients that I have when we're working together. They're like, oh, maybe I'm in the wrong job. I'm like, yeah, maybe you're in the wrong job. And I mean, to your point earlier about fitting into the box, I think that is also applicable to every kind of ism that there is. That people want diversity of thought, and they want diverse people in their organizations, and they want all these kinds of things. And they say, hey, come play in our sandbox. But then people who come don't want to stay, as you say, but then the business never goes, maybe we need to alter our sandbox so that people will want to stay. And I think that's the struggle that businesses are having right now, where they're like, our things are changing, and it can't be us. They're still not going, maybe it is us. Maybe we need to change the way that we do business and the way that we accommodate people. Otherwise, we're never really going to get the freedom that we want. And I'm with you on the whole, do what I like. That's why I love the consulting work that I do too, because I have a variety of things that I can do. And actually, the best thing about being a consultant and self-employed is that it's all up to you. And the worst thing about being self-employed is it's all up to you.
Yeah. Well, I found a kind of hybrid where I'm working for these big companies, but they are more willing to listen to me as a consultant than they were as an employee, which I tend to think that that's the mistake they're making. Huge. Where they actually want guys like me, but they only hire me as a consultant.
That's right.
Because when they put you through that performance review and they put you through the bell curve, you don't fit what they want. But then they say they want a guy who looks like me, and there's hardly anybody who looks like me in the room, right? Or there's not a lot of people that look like her in the room or look like whoever. And then they say they want the people from outside, but they don't make it easy for the people from the outside. They don't want to make them comfortable. They want to force you to become some homogenized thing that is never going to be the next Bill Gates or the next Elon Musk, because that doesn't come from homogenization.
No. Right.
So they don't understand the creative process. When I think what happens is, I looked in the mirror one day and I said, I know who I am.
Yay.
I know what I want to do. And I see that, being on this certain track wasn't going to do it. It was never going to do it. I did it a bunch of times. How many times do you have to fail before you figure out that you learn from the failure? And I think that failure is as a musician, we fail all the time. 99% of our songs don't make it, right? And as a programmer, we fail all the time. Most of our stuff doesn't work, and then we get it to work, right? So the whole idea is you have to embrace the failure and learn from it. The problem is a lot of people have the failure and they just keep on doing it. They don't learn.
They keep doing the same thing. That's right. That's right. And that's like whether you're doing it in art. I think one of the most, let's see, what did I learn most from one of my failures? Yeah, what did I learn? You know what? It's interesting. I think one of the biggest things that I learned when I was singing in the opera, because that's where I started, did my education, and then was singing in the opera, freelancing and teaching elementary school music. And what I learned in the art world was the make it and give it away factor. Make it and give it away. It's not your job to judge it. You make it and you give it away. And then it's up to other people to do the judging. So having that internal judge all the time running is really not helpful. And I think that's contributing to the high levels of anxiety that people are experiencing also in the workplace and in dealing with their presence. They're so anxious all the time because they're being and they're judging at the same time, which never works. You set it up, you show up, you be the best you can be. Sounds super cliche, but you're there. And then let's see what happens. Right? If you're constantly judging, you're going to be holding back all the time. It's not useful.
That's why I found it like in music. Like I know theory. I could sit down and write the bars, but I'm more of a stream of consciousness type of person. So over time, I decided I'd rather just do it stream of consciousness fusion, kind of just like let the tape roll and then let it be. Right. So the idea you just do, and I found over time that you start to trust your artistic judgments. Right. That if you keep on going back and rewinding the tape and doing something over and over, trying to reach some perfection that's in your head, instead of letting yourself trust yourself and actually run through it without stopping. And I find that like with writers, they'll tell you, like when I'm talking to authors, there's a school of thought is like just write in that book or go on the typewriter and just write. Then go back and look at it. But if you keep on starting and stopping, that judgment will totally wreck you from getting anything done.
It will, absolutely. Actually, that's one interesting thing that I found with my writing coach. So I did bring my books, even though we're talking professional presence. I brought my books with me too, because I know you talk to musicians and artists as well, and authors. But in the writing piece, my writing coach said to me, she goes, "I've never worked with a writer like you because you're super fast and you edit on the fly and you just write it." So like if I write something, I happen to write in poetry. So my books are all like stories. It's a story arc, but they're all in poems. And I'll write it and I don't edit often. Like I'll just write it and it's done. And then if there's something, more often than not, I'm going through and I might tweak a word, or we might remove something, or I might just cut a bunch of stuff because we don't need it for the story. And that's way, way easier to do. And like, there's other people in my writers group that everybody's writing different books and everybody writes at a different pace and they all write in different ways. But since starting with my writers group in the fall of 2021, I think it was 2020. I don't know. Time's weird now, but not for very long. I've written and published 2 books and I'm working on my third, my art book, and then my business book in quick succession, chiefly because I can just do it. So I could just make it and give it away, make it and give it away, make it and give it away. It's way easier than iterating. You can iterate later.
Yeah, I just find it's more freeing to the overall, like I start to trust my kind of muse. Like you trust the muse because like if you've been a musician, I've been playing since I was 14, I'm 55.
Nice.
Like you know how to play, right? If you're I'm a keyboard, I'm a synthesis. So you trust your gut. And you just do it. And it's I've been with guys who are kind of really, like kind of anal. They're like they gotta start and stop. They start and stop so much. It's like I'm sitting there, like you're taking the fun out of the whole thing. Right?
Yeah, because it's not fun.
Because it's not fun if you keep on starting and stopping. It's like because you don't trust yourself. I just told the guys like just trust your heart and your feeling, right? Trust what you're doing. I'm not gonna judge it, just do it. Because I'm the type of guy, I like the third, second, maybe the first 5 takes. I'm likely to take the first or second take and say that actually felt more honest. Because what I find people doing, if you get to like the 9th and the 10th and the 99th take, you start editing yourself and taking away the honesty of what you originally were doing. Because suddenly 100%. You start second guessing yourself. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe I shouldn't feel that. Oh, it wasn't, and then you just wreck it because it's like your original intentions usually are closer to what's going on in your subconscious. Because I'm a kind of a dream writer, like taking those dreams and just let it go. And when you start to trust yourself, I think that's when you get really good. And if I take that and I apply it to my business, I got better at business when I started, worrying what they were going to think. And just went with my experience and to say, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to feel confident. And that confidence will show in your presentation when you're not so anxious, you're not I think that just it's hard to get to that point. I would say when I was in my 20s, I was nowhere near where I am now. I could not, I couldn't even do this show because I was so scared of public speaking. I couldn't even do it. So the point where I am now, like I looked at that version of myself, it's like I don't even know who that was. because
I know, it's so
I'm
weird,
not
isn't
there
it?
anymore.
Yeah, I'm 52 now, and it's the same kind of thing. And almost all the clients that I work with are in that sort of 30 to 50 range. Some people are older, and some people are. It's a very rare exception; they're younger. And I always say to people, here's what I've observed: in your 30s, your 20s, hot mess, just be a hot mess. In the 30s, you're figuring it out. You're starting to put some things in place and some consistency. When you hit 40, that's when people say, like, F it, I'm going to do what I like. And then when people hit 50, it's F you, get out of my way. I'm doing what I like. Like, it's the power of being over 50 is the bomb. So great. And now, to be fair, I'm also meeting some 20 somethings that just have it dialed in. They are on the ball with their emotional intelligence, with their relational skills. And I think what's missing for them is that sense of, it doesn't matter what other people think. Like, I need to show up and be myself. So they could use a little bit of that. Man, I think the kids are all right now. And I think if you're our age, right?
My daughter's 20. She's 23, and she's got. Luckily, she acts like she's 55, which to my consternation, it's like, so she's like, okay, well, she's like, she's already like where I am now at 23. Yeah. She's like, she's super confident, and she's an artist, and she just knows. She just got it. I think her generation sometimes is very cool with not being hung up on certain things and being honest. Like she's very honest about where her head's at and not repressing her feelings, and really just being more open. At least I seem the people around her friends. And I'm like, wow. And like, I was never that open.
No, I know. Well, we weren't allowed to be. I think to be fair, a lot of that openness has to do with the parenting. So I'm just going to maybe give you a little good dad props there. If your kid is really confident and she's out there with her expression and she feels good about it, that might have had something to do with the parenting that she received. Just, maybe a little bit. Because I'm not a parent myself, but I see people of my age parenting, and I'm like, damn, you're the parent I wish I'd had. Like, they're really doing some great things with the parenting. But I think if we, as older people, middle-aged people, don't have mentors that are under 30, we are missing out in a big way because we're not able to keep up with what's happening. So I think all of this stuff that we're touching on really speaks to this whole self-living, this wholehearted, whole person, whole presence piece that, in a way, I'm excited because I wasn't allowed to be that open. It was very much seen and not heard. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I got yelled at for practicing, because practicing sounds terrible. It's not supposed to sound good, right? It doesn't sound good. And you have to be willing for it to sound terrible until it sounds good. And the number of times that, oh man, it's not good. And so I don't think you're not allowed to be. I don't think we were allowed to be that expressive as kids, as people are allowed to be now.
Yeah, because, I wanted to go to Berkeley. I wanted to be a musician.
Yeah.
I ended up going to Bowdoin and getting into, I became a Bachelor of Arts, and I was a sociology major and I was a political science major, but I wasn't into comp sci. I did comp sci as a hobby. I did computers, and my hobby became my job. It became my career. And then I kind of forced my art to get to center stage, because I kind of went through something where in my late 20s, I had a level 3 sarcoma. And then I survived it. And then I said, you know what? All my dreams about being a musician, I'm not going to stop doing that. I went whole hog into being an independent musician, and it wasn't, and then I got to this point where now I do the podcast, but I was able to be in charge of my own career in terms of music the way I wanted it, and I didn't compromise, and I kept on going where my friends all stopped because, this band's not going anywhere. We're just playing at a bar. I kept on writing to this day, and I still do a lot of work. And I was able to be satisfied because I decided I was going to do art for art's sake, and I'm going to do my career. And I started to not be scared.
Right.
Where, I wasn't a singer and I started to sing. I wasn't a public speaker and I started to public speak. I started doing poetry readings. I started becoming this other version of myself that I felt I had, because I went through the crucible of cancer. I kind of just said, I'm not going to be scared of anything. And it really was my big change
Mm-hmm.
moment was because I challenged myself. I challenged my own glass ceiling. And I think, you don't have to have a
Mm-hmm.
crucible to do that, but that's what
Yeah.
happened with me.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like you and I are having some weird parallel life action here, because that's what happened to me. Is I ended up when I was teaching, so I was doing this opera and teaching thing, and I actually had a lung tumor. And I mean, I know why I had a lung tumor. I have a really strong belief in the mind body connection. And so I had this lung tumor because I was so miserable that I used to wish something would kill me. So I got it. And then I was like, uh-oh. And I had
You
actually
don't want
just decided to leave. Like, my husband looked at me and he's like, you have to leave these jobs. They're killing you. Like, you're literally suffocating. And so
that. Mhm.
I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was going to do. I'm like, you know what? Okay, that's it. So I went on medical leave and then I quit. And like, I had tenure. I would have had to kill somebody to get fired. And I was just like, I got to go. And so I did that. And then 6 months later, I had a job doing corporate training and the tumor was gone. Right. And I was like, oh, guess I don't need this anymore. And I was really lucky, like just super lucky that it just started shrinking and then it went away. So that was actually really funny walking into the radiologist's office, my follow-up appointment, because he literally was like looking at, then they still had film at that time, right? He's looking at the film and he's like, then he goes out of the office, he
Where'd it go?
talks to his admin person, comes back, he's like, is this the right film? And he's like, it's gone. I'm like, I know, it's gone. Right. So I had that moment of like, life is way too short. And so I think the other piece that's really difficult for people is putting so much pressure on themselves to succeed at a young age. Like this whole top 40 under 40 stuff. I want to see the top 100 under 100. Like, really, that's a list. That's a list I
Yeah.
want to see, because I think that, I don't think I started my business when I was 38, 39 when I went full time, 30, like I started part-time when I was 36, 37, and then went full time later. So before I was 40. And now it's awesome. Like everything I wanted 10 years ago, I have, and I'm at this exciting place of saying, okay, what do I want next? And the explosion of, because like you say, I'm not afraid. So the explosion of creativity that's happening, the explosion in my whole business is changing now. I'm just saying much more real, many more real things to people in a much nicer way. I used to be pretty rude. So there's that. I learned to be a bit more diplomatic, which is useful in my profession. But I still want to speak the truth as well as I understand it. And I want people to do the same. It's like, the world needs you to show up. The world needs you to be here. There was the best story I ever heard about that was years ago. I was doing a speak to sell workshop, which was terrible, but that's beside the point. I did get this great nugget. And the great nugget was life is like this potluck dinner, a big banquet. And you show up and you bring your dish and it's spiced exactly the way that you do it. And no one else can cook it the way you can. And if you don't come to the table, then someone else doesn't eat. Because they can only eat your dish. They can only hear the message from you. They just can't hear it any other way. And so if you don't show up with it, then that person doesn't eat and they go hungry. And that has really stuck with me, because I'm like, yeah, okay, well, maybe I am saying something similar to what somebody else says about professional presence. Great. Maybe I'm saying something similar about seize the day or all those things. Great. But if one person hears it from me and is changed because of it, then I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing. We need you. You have to show up. So you might as well make friends with your container and get rolling.
Yeah, I think you have to figure out what's going to make you happy. I think that's part of the great resignation is a lot of people discovered that they could, they were in place and they finally determined, and that's a hard thing to do, because a lot of people just, routine is easy, but it's actually hard.
Sure.
Because if routine is just it's just familiar, you're not satisfied. Well, then that's damaging too, because like, yeah, you're just doing the routine, but there's like no fun. When there's no fun in life, then you get depressed and all kinds of other things can happen. So the idea to make your life more exciting by just being true to your vision, and every human being has a vision. You're a creative or not.
It's true.
Everybody has some kind of spark that makes them happy, and whatever it is. And when you decide that you can actually do that more often than just like a little, piece of your life, if you can make what you love doing the most the primary thing that you're doing, then I
Right.
think that becomes like the key to like, well, how do you get successful? Well, if you're doing something you really love, then
Right.
it's gonna radiate all around you, and people are gonna feel your positivity, and then that's gonna kind of
That's
keep
right.
on reinforcing itself.
Hmm. I think to add to that, it's also what you end up doing that you love might not be what you thought you loved in the beginning. And the
Mm,
second piece I think that's important to think about is it's okay to love what you love, because there are people. So I'm actually experiencing this with my husband right now because he just changed careers and he went into film editing, and he was in the corporate world prior to that. And he loves film editing. He's an amazing editor. He probably should have been editing all along, but life happens. And his risk tolerance for self-employment is much lower than my risk tolerance. And so for him, a steady job is great. He likes a steady job. It's good for him. He enjoys the routine of it. He likes the steadiness of it. And I think sometimes in our sort of Instagram world, people are always being encouraged to be self-employed or to be risk takers or to be something that actually doesn't suit who they really are. Even my best friend is like
mm,
super diligent. She's like boom, boom, boom. Very linear. I have another friend who knew that she wanted to be a lawyer when she was 8, and she is, and she's amazing at it.
mhm,
So, and for me, the love thing, like I was so in love with my art and my singing and my speaking and my like all of that. I love that so much. And it just wasn't like when I was in the opera, what I used to do is I used to do all my business work first. I used to do all the marketing and all the scheduling and all the emails and all the promo work in the morning. And then when it came time to practice in the afternoon, I'm like, I don't really want to do that. And that was a clue to me to be like, oh, I love opera as an art form. I admire my friends who do it. I think if I was approaching it with what I know now, it might be different. But at the time I was like, yeah, I can't really see myself doing this for the rest of my life. But what I do love is personal growth. That's been my jam for
mm.
so long. And so that's the work I'm doing as my business, is helping other people grow. And I'm growing too at the same time. So yeah, but if you had told me like a dozen years ago that I would be doing this business, I would have laughed my butt off. I'd be like, what are you talking about? That's not even, my job is not even a job. Who does that job? But here I am. So I think it's okay to have it be unexpected.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had like my day job because I
Yeah.
find like the not that different because it's creativity. Like I do design.
Hmm.
I design stuff in
Right.
software that hasn't been
Yeah.
built before. So I found a
Fun.
way to kind of yeah, it's fun, but you're building for like banks and insurance companies, so that's not like
Yeah.
building for video games. But
Right.
the idea is still creative, and I try
Hmm.
to take the creative spark that I have for my music and then use that to
Hmm.
also inspire my day to day. And I found a synergy between both of them because
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
certain level of kind of math precision being a keyboardist that
Mm.
there's to being in
Yeah.
the program, and then there's some math in all of it. And I
Hmm.
found a way to kind of get comfortable with both careers and both
Yeah.
things that became hobbies and careers at the same time. And
Hmm.
then I was like, okay, then I can do everything I want to do, and I
Yeah.
don't have to give one of them up to do the other one. And I found a way to
Hmm.
have the synergy between them, and I think
Yes.
that's like it's hard to get balance. I think that's what people are always looking for.
Hmm.
Sometimes people get out of balance trying to get to
Hmm.
the next trend. It's like, oh, I got to be an Instagram influencer, and that's where my jam's going to be. And then, well, maybe that's not really who you are. Um,
Hmm.
so, like, are you an influencer? Are you a musician? Are you a poet? Are you an
Right.
influencer? Are you
Right.
or just a creative person?
Right.
And
Can
does
you be
that
all those things?
yeah? Could
Right.
you match it? Or are you a model? Or you're an actor? Like, who are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got
Yeah.
to figure
You can
that out.
figure it out. And I think it's the thing about, you can do everything you want. You just can't do everything right now.
Mm,
So
that's
you can't do it
true.
all at once. So you have to kind of pick, because I remember thinking that I wanted to write a book years and years ago. But I just kind of backburnered it because it's like, okay, I want to write this book, but I really need to build this business. So I'm going to focus on building my business first, which I did. And then, through COVID, it was like, well, I have time.
Yeah, to get
I can do
away.
some writing and get back into it. And then it was sort of a question of saying, well, okay, so I love the 3 a.m. download sort of lists, because I wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm awake for a couple of hours. So I do this kind of shift sleeping thing. But when I wake up in the middle of the night, one of the things that I like to do is say, okay, hey, universe, here's something I'd like to do. Who do I need to meet next? What are the next steps? Like, I don't know what the next steps are. And I just, one of my coach acquaintances in LA, he's like, clarity is overrated. Great.
Yeah.
So I don't need to see all of it, but I need to have this idea of who do I need to talk to. And for writing my books, it was literally like a 5 a.m. list or 3 and whatever. It was like, okay, who do I need to meet? What's the next step? Who do I need to talk to? And then about a week later, I was like, oh, because like things work within us without us, right? So in the back of my mind, I was thinking about it. And then this name popped into my mind, my writing coach, Tina Overbury, who does beautiful writing coaching. Her name popped in. I was like, oh, I wonder if she's doing that thing with the story thing. And then I called her and she's like, yeah, I'm doing that thing. And in fact, I'm doing this retreat. You want to come? And it was like a month later. I'm like, sure. And that's how the whole thing started. But it was listening to kind of that whispering of like, okay, I'm having too much business. This is too corporate. I need a little art. What am I going to do here? And even with the singing and songwriting, like from writing the first book, I met a music producer who read the book because I was on his podcast with my writing coach. They have a podcast together. And then he took some source material. He wrote a hook from one of the tunes. And then we ended up writing a song together and recording it. And I've not been in the booth in a long, long time. But that experience was great. And he's like, oh, you were built for this. Like you could do these different things musically that he says, so like I said, what do you mean? He says, it's good to work with somebody who's trained. And I'm like, well, aren't all singers trained to some degree? And he's like, yeah, but he said, there's singers who are like R&B singers and everything that they do is R&B. It has a flavor of R&B. It's always R&B. Or I work with a soul singer and then all they do is that. They can't sort of morph from one thing to another. So there is some value in being able to, they can't cross over. Right. So like one of the songs that he wrote, the hook that he wrote is like a super pop ballad, big piano jam. And the other one that we wrote is like a filthy, dirty sex R&B jam. Like it's completely different, but it's so much fun. Yeah. It's just, totally I can't tell you how much fun it is. Totally different. And I think,
I always find it hard to find. It's hard to find people who have that kind of Frank Zappa or Prince kind of capability because a lot of people are niche. A lot of people who are artists, they're like niche artists. They're in one thing. And then when they want to cross into something, because I like punk music. I like The Clash, I like Joy Division, I like bands like Husker Du, right? But I also like funk. It's totally different things. But I always say, well, I can take that punk aesthetic and apply it to funk, and I can take the funk and apply it to punk. And so you can cross it. Over. And when you cross, you can get stuff like a Blondie, like, where they were kind of mixing pop and punk and new wave and rap. And I always liked a lot of the new wave bands because they could cross. Like Blondie, when you listen to them, they're very cross genre. Talking Heads, very cross. It's like hard to pin them down because they're actually expansive. That's why the idea of expansive in my music is because one day I might be channeling Coltrane, the next day I might be channeling Johnny Cash.
I was just going to say John Cash. Oh my God.
Yeah, I like so many different things that I don't like to get pinned down, and so people want to pin me down and then the next day I'm doing something like Genesis, and they're like, well, I thought you were doing like Zappa stuff. It's like, no, it's like I kind of go wherever my head's at. And if I'm in that kind of mindset, I go wherever it takes me. I say I serve the song that comes into my head, and it might be coming from somewhere I don't know where. And so many people are so like, I got to be in this genre and I got to nail it, and that's all I ever do. And I'm like, nah, I don't like that.
Yeah, that's one of the disadvantages, I think.
Yeah,
that's one of the disadvantages I think of people who say, I want to do this thing and I need to be like, just to stay in the lane, right? Like I need to stay in the lane. I need to pick a horse and ride it until I get to some imagined pinnacle of success. I think that it's just super, right? I think it's really hard on you. Like I remember when I was singing in the opera in San Francisco years ago, I was singing in a summer company there, and I love country music. I grew up on country music. I love country music, and I love the opera. And so, I had a bunch of opera snob friends, and they were all, then there was a bass and I that were talking about Johnny Cash, talking about the simplicity and beauty of country music, and how it's a valid art form. And so this one mezzo soprano was like, how can you listen to that stuff? It's terrible. And I was like, okay. I said, here's the deal. Country and opera are the same, but they're opposite ends of the spectrum. Country they sing about the same stuff. So love, family, heartbreak, relationships, they sing about all the same stuff. Only country takes it down to the most beautiful, simplest. It's like the brevity of it, the simplicity of it is incredible. And opera just blows it out into like this huge wash of like everything. But I said they're
Production.
The same thing.
Like
same thing.
Overproduction.
Right. Same thing. And she's like, oh, well, and I'm like, what? And she goes, well, I have to listen to some. I said, yeah, you do. You have to listen to everything. Don't just listen to one thing, because
listen to Johnny Cash Folsom Prison.
Artist, right? Totally right.
I always really into the way Cash could have that kind of train going. Yeah, this kind of train sound.
Yeah, chug, chug, chug.
I know. Track of his band being totally. Chugga. And then also the content of the Man in Black. He's got this kind of affinity toward the darkness, toward things that were. If you read his lyrics, they're like poetic. It's like probably the most poetic of all the country music people. It's got this motif of the Man in Black and the kind of dark side of things, and it's not typical of there's some people they'll be in that zone, but he was really that zone. And I always thought when on Nashville Skyline, I thought it was a great kind of merging of Dylan. I love his lyrics, and then Cash's style. There's wow, they should have done that more. But that was always.
I think the fundamental thing though is that what you and I were saying earlier about somebody being true to themselves. I think the artists that we're talking about now, 100% were true to themselves. So they had an aesthetic, they have a thing, or like Dolly Parton, for example, incredibly prolific writer, talking about someone who writes, makes it, and gives it away. Hugely fast, prolific writer, has her lane, and then she spends her time doing all these other things around it. Right. And I think that
acting and other things beyond it.
Yeah, she does all the other things too. Same with Lady Gaga, right? Lady Gaga is an incredible artist. And she has her lane, and her lane is this massive creative expansion. Right. Same with the other artists of the day. But it's amazing to me how many people are limited and how many people feel they have to be a certain way. And I find that in my professional work as well, around this professional presence piece. If you're going to fit yourself into a box, you should really make sure the box belongs to you and nobody else. Make your own box, and then you fit into that box.
What do you think about people who have clone boxes?
People who have what?
People who have clone boxes, right?
Boxes?
Cloned boxes. They're cloning somebody else's. They're locking themselves into.
Yeah, no.
In the musician world, right? There's the top 10. There's all these producers using the same beats, using the same plugins, the same drum loops, the same pads, because it worked, right? So because it worked and it made $1 million or it sold 200 million copies, then that's the only thing you should do. And so then they end up being in some mega producer, right? That's not them. Here's a singer-songwriter. There's a mega producer that's doing 200 million replays. So, I go with him. But all he does is it can clone what he's done, so he can get more money off of the royalties of the same beats he keeps on reusing. And then you go into his box, so you can get into the top 10, but it's not authentically you. And my whole thing is, I think it's better if you actually take your demo and make it the best version of yourself rather than trying to be in that clone box.
That's right. Yeah. And I think it depends on your goals, right? If all you're thinking about is I want to be in the top 10 and I want to be famous and I want to do this thing, then knock yourself out. Maybe that is true to who you are. But I think if there's any other sort of spark of creativity in you, then you're never really going to be happy in somebody else's box. And also, when you're thinking about happiness, this happiness piece, stop moving the goalposts. I think that's another big piece people do. They're like, you get to it. You're like, this is going to make me happy. And so you get there and then you're like, I'm not happy. Oh, this is going to make me happy. Well, quit moving the goalposts, right? Like decide, I've sometimes laugh about like things like real estate. I have friends that are like, hey, when are you going to upgrade? I'm like, look, we bought our place in 2005. It's a 2-bedroom condo in Vancouver. We have a great location. People are like, when are you going to buy it? I'm like, no, I'm just not going to do that. I'm happy. And I think
you're never satisfied and you keep on upgrading.
Yeah.
Because
that's right. It's like lifestyle creep.
Train.
Yep.
Yeah.
You get on the train,
creep.
and I think
you
that's
just keep on. Yeah, I think the problem I always have is what are you trying to do, like as an artist?
Yes.
Like, are you trying to be like authentic self and get your body of work? Like the way I look at it, like you get a guy like William Blake, right? William Blake was never famous in his time, but he had the spark to put everything he did on metallic etchings. Like he felt like he wanted it to be permanent. So he kind of had this feeling that even though he wasn't famous in his own time, it would be famous. So he had a level of confidence that he etched it into that. And you kind of have to, like, if you have that kind of Blakean idea, like I want to etch my mark, right? I want to actually have my authentic self and then find a way to actually get it out there. And the way the world is today, because of social media and the net, there's people all over the world that may embrace your unique style. So you don't have to clone somebody else. You could actually be yourself.
Yeah, I know. Shocking, right? I love that. I actually I know social media does a lot of harm. I know there's harmful places in it as well, but I love watching TikTok. I love TikTok because there are so many people that are like doing all these really interesting, unique things. And yes, there are also people who do one thing and it hits. And so they continue to replicate that and they stay in their lane, and that's fine too. But I just love watching the people just be themselves and like be vulnerable and show up and do cool things on video. And I've learned a lot from TikTok in terms of like, because it's a great micro learning environment, right? 3 minutes on a topic. After scrolling TikTok for a while, you can have a whole lot of education about something you didn't know about.
Well, it's like how art can be your elevator speech. Like if you think about corporate people always talk about that elevator speech that you have with somebody when you're trying to get that pitch, right? But TikTok is the pitch, right?
Yeah.
That's how artists and creatives are making this pitch. That's their elevator pitch to the world. And I always tell people like, well, how can you mix art with business, right? How can you do that? They're two different lanes. And I've always said, people told me when I got into, because I was primarily a music podcaster. My initial podcasts were all singer-songwriters. And I moved way beyond that. But and people said, well, how could you do that? How could you do that? Because like you're known for music podcasts. Yeah, in 2016, 2017, that's what I was known for. But the way I looked at it is like, I have this idea of expansive sound. So expansive sound means I can do any genre. So I said, well, my podcast is the same way. I can be expansive in my choice. And people, you can't do that because you're supposed to be narrow. Well, consultants were telling me, oh, you have to have a narrow focus. You can only do this. And I'm like, as soon as somebody tell me that, I'm like, I don't think that's not me. So maybe that's you, but that's not me.
You're like, you're not the boss of me now. I'm going to go do what I like.
I do what I want. It's like, you know
what? I bought into that for a long time. I remember consulting with people early on in my career and saying to people, look, if you're at a networking event, don't tell people that you do 3 different things. And okay, so that might ring true for like when you're first meeting someone, but I don't know. I mean, I think I've changed my mind on that now. It's like, if you're doing more than one thing, you can lead with something and talk to them about that. But I feel like it's just, I don't know, life is too short to be hiding all the other cool things that you do and all the other cool facets of you just because you want to say one thing, So like and it's interesting because I'm having these conversations with my marketing team right now because we're trying to figure out like I found that over the last few years in COVID, I started getting pulled into consulting on business issues that I'm like, I don't I'm really into relational skills and relational leadership, and the personal growth piece is really my jam. And I found myself facilitating for clients. They're like, "Hey, can you come facilitate this work back planning session?" And I'm like, "Okay," because I can, but I'm like, I don't actually care. I mean, I love you guys. I don't care about your work back plan. Like, I don't want to do that. You want to have an uncomfortable conversation? You want to talk about like some real feelings in the boardroom? I'm the one for you. I 100% will dive into those conversations. You're having trouble communicating? I'm there for you. You're not sure about how to make a presentation? I'm there for you. But anyway, I found myself getting pulled into these sort of other things. And so I had to sit down with my team and be like, okay, we're going to start marketing and getting out there and sharing more of what we do with the world. So like, we gotta figure it out. And they're trying to, they've been trying to figure out how to put me in a box for years, and it's not working. So now we're going whole person. Whole person is the way is where it's at. The wave of the future.
Like the A&R people always want to put you in a box. It's always based on whatever you did last and did the best, right? Because like if you do well on one thing, then it's like, well, that's it. And
that's the thing. No, that's the only thing.
I do like. That's the only thing is like I do 10 other things. It's like I don't want to just do that, and you get famous people like Prince, like he didn't want to keep on playing Purple Rain all day, right? No, he had a lot of other things besides that. It's boring. And now you can get some people that's all they do. It's like, okay, I had that one hit. I'm going to keep on in that one hit. Yeah. And because that's the bread and butter. But is it really satisfying? And, you get some artists that are willing to challenge the pre-existing, rules. Is like, if I keep on rewriting Purple Rain over and over, I could be top. I don't want to do that. Yeah. I want to do something that makes me happy. I think I understand that a lot, because as a musician, it's like, it's very boring to have to play the same tune every day. Yeah. In front of the crowd. And even so you want to challenge yourself, even in your business, like your biggest success. Are you going to just replicate that, or are you going to take a risk and maybe fail on the next thing just because you want to see what else you can do? Right. And I don't think it's wrong to try that, but some people would tell you it is.
I know they do. And I'm like, you know what? I'm willing to take the risk. I'm with you on that. It's like, I would rather take the risk and try something new. And yes, could I learn a few things about maintaining a foundation? Yes. I could learn a few things about, changing your baseline and, I don't know, saving money for the future, things like that, which now I do, which is good. But I could learn some things about sort of maintaining that stuff. But really, like, where the true love for me lies is in that jumping for the next, like, you're the trapeze, you're swinging, and you're going to do the leap, and you're going to leap for the next bar. And you're like, okay, you just have to have, like, okay, the next bar is coming. And there's moments when you feel like you're falling through the space, like you're going to hit the concrete, and then wham, something picks it up and away you go. So there's also something to be said for living on a little bit on faith and not being afraid. Faith, not fear. Right.
Yeah. I mean, you got to have that trust in yourself. You can, it's like when you're playing in a jazz combo and you don't know exactly where you're going to go, but it's okay.
I know.
It's like, it's okay that you don't know, and you don't stop the song just because you went somewhere. Know. You recover. I think the whole thing about that type of work is the recovery. Are you graceful recovery so nobody even knew you hit the wrong note?
That's right.
Or are you going to let the whole world know you hit the wrong note?
Yeah, you're going to stop and go, oh my goodness. I'm just learning this about jazz because I started singing. So because I was in the opera, I started singing with a big band here in Vancouver about 7 years ago. And the first time and of course, that usually when singers sing with a big band, the singer brings the key and the band plays. But because I was joining the band, they already had the keys. So I had to make it work. But the first time that my band leader said, you don't have to sing right what's on the page, I was like, I don't. It was shocking. Yeah. And then when I started doing small combo work, I was like, okay, like this could go any direction. And sometimes it goes in a weird, unexpected direction, but then it's so great because you have to be present in your work for it to work.
You have to read the crowd. Read the other musicians.
Yeah. You got to you get the eye contact thing going. Yeah. Like, hey, are you going to start at the top again? Like, what's going on? Right. And it's such a great communication exercise.
Watching the drum player. I'm like, you're watching the drummer, you're watching the bass player, you kind of see the bass player go off, and I'm like, okay, I will follow him. Or I can follow the drummer and the bass player because I got two hands, and I can go off, and then I could actually like force the change because I could actually like, well, I want to force the change. So then you do it. Like it's like when you're in a jazz group, it depends on like how much confidence you have to where you can actually lead it. So you're gonna let like somebody lead it, or you're gonna all be leaders and kind of go a little bit of cacophony, but then you come back and a little cacophony. Come back. I love it because it's kind of like life. You don't know exactly what's gonna happen, but it's all gonna work out, right? And so that's what I try to bring to the table.
Yeah, I agree. You don't know what's gonna happen, but it's all gonna work out. And then I think the tools you pick up along the way are really helpful. So, we started this conversation off talking about the work that I do around professional presence. And I think it's just a tool. It's just a tool. That's it. So, and all it does, like people ask me what I do. And I'm like, well, basically you hire me to put you in the fire, right? Like you hire me to put you in the crucible of figuring out who you are and figuring out what you want to do quickly and figuring out the best sort of packaging to help you get that done and the best communication to help you get that done. And that's it. It's all about you and how you want to move through the world. So pick up your toolkit, get going.
Well, I always like to let people know for the audio audience, we have a link there that if you're on the video, you probably don't see, but you go to https://lzrkconsulting.com. And what do you get there when you find it? They can make appointments with you?
So that's my professional website. So if you want some of my professional work, you find me there. And just fill out the contact form, and then my team will get in touch with you and we'll set up a time to chat. And I'm always happy to talk to people. If you want to, I'm easy to find. I'm easy to find. So if you're in the audio audience and you want to find out more about me, just Google my name. So Katherine, Katherine, Lazaruk, Lazaruk. And there's my professional site. There's my author site, katherinelazaruk.com. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. There's not very many Katherine Lazaruks around.
And when this fully publishes, everybody should know that will be fully clickable. So when you actually go to the published Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify, when we're on those platforms, that will be clickable. So if you go to lzrkconsulting.com, you can actually click it. It'll go right through. And so we do encourage people who listen and watch the podcast to actually click on the links of the people we interview so they can get more information about what we've talked about here. And we do appreciate you being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost Show. It was really cool.
I'm so pleased that you invited me to be on the show. It's been a great experience. And it's so nice to meet you, a fellow free spirit. I love it.
Thank you. And everybody be aware, we'll be fully published on all those platforms. We were live on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. There will be permanent links for those, and there will be a landing page that will provide to Katherine, and you can go to the podcast however you want. Once we have that landing page out there, we will put it on familyelectricghost.com. We have a blogger page for every episode that we produce. So if you can go there, it'll be on the latest episode of Family Electric Ghost podcast will be on familyelectricghost.com. So be on the show, and hope you have a good night.
Bye, everybody.